The Voidstar of Sorrow, a title dripping with malice and destruction, watched the shimmering blue marble of a planet drift closer on his bridge's view screen. Human scum called it Eden 4, a paradise, they said. Soon, it would belong to his Voidstar Legion, its cities burning, its people screaming in delicious agony. His scarred, four-eyed visage warped into a twisted imitation of a smile. "Captain," he addressed a hulking brute of his own species, "prepare the first wave. Grind these insects into dust." Eden 4, like many frontier human colonies, held no strategic value for the broader interstellar powers, but the humans clung to it, a testament to their maddening stubbornness. The Voidstar of Sorrow saw an opportunity here, to bleed them slowly, to remind them that defiance would be met not just with force, but with overwhelming cruelty. The humans would die, but not before he'd broken them. On the planet below, Lance Corporal Stephen Jackson felt the first shudder of orbital bombardment. He was nothing special, a skinny kid from a backwater Terran world. Now he was a United Systems Marine positioned in a dusty forward base. "Incoming, Marines! Grab your gear and take cover!" His rough and confident sergeant's voice cut through the building panic. Stephen didn't question his orders. He followed them, muscle memory and sheer survival instinct propelling him forward. The initial reports trickled in aboard the Voidstar Legion's flagship, painting a picture that brought a guttural rumble of satisfaction from deep within the Voidstar of Sorrow's throat. Planetary defenses were practically non-existent, and ground forces were disorganized and scattered. Primitive, these humans. His lieutenants, a collection of scarred warmongers and power-hungry sycophants, sensed their master's pleasure and mirrored it with their own grunts and cheers. "They break like brittle reeds, my lord," exclaimed one, a particularly repulsive toad-like creature with pustulant skin. "Their courage is a myth." "Do not underestimate them entirely, Turgus," the Voidstar growled in response, his voice as harsh as shattered glass. "They are like cornered vermin, dangerous if desperate." But his words lacked conviction, and they were more of a ritual than an actual warning. After all, hadn't his legion conquered worlds far more formidable than this speck? "Prepare the drop pods," he ordered with an eager glint in his eyes. "Let us feast upon their fear firsthand." On the bridge of the Voidstar's flagship, a gruesome spectacle unfolded. Holographic displays flickered with live feeds from the planet's surface. Cities burned, choked by plumes of oily black smoke. Civilian transports became twisted wrecks on impact with the ground, leaving trails of crimson that stained the once pristine landscape. The Voidstar Legionnaires poured out of their drop pods like ravenous insects. Towering chitinous exoskeletons gleamed under the dying sun, their multi-jointed limbs wielding bioweapons that spat acidic venom and tore flesh with horrifying efficiency. Screams echoed from the feeds, raw and desperate, before being abruptly silenced. The Marines, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with the desperate fury of cornered wolves. His face etched with grim determination, Sergeant Thomas led his squad through a maze of ruined buildings. Their laser rifles spat hot emerald fire, momentarily turning the tide before withering under a hail of crackling plasma fire. But against the sheer relentlessness of the Legion assault, human resistance crumbled. One by one, the feeds flickered and died, replaced by static or the cold, empty void of space. A savage grin split the Voidstar of Sorrow's face. Eden 4 was his. "Prepare the jump drive," he boomed, his voice echoing with cruel satisfaction. "We have more insects to crush." The bridge crew scrambled to obey. This was just the beginning. The conquest of this sector of the galaxy was within his grasp. Meanwhile, on a lush green planet bathed in the gentle glow of a binary sun, a young man named Lieutenant Sam Parker paced nervously in the command center of a gleaming base. News of Eden 4's fall had arrived just hours ago, a chilling reminder of the brutal threat they faced. The command center on Eden Prime was a maelstrom of controlled chaos. Alerts blared, officers shouted orders, and the base's pervasive metallic hum pulsed with a desperate urgency. Lieutenant Sam Parker, a lean and battle-hardened figure in olive fatigues, gripped the edge of a hollow table. His short-cropped hair was already dusted with premature gray, starkly contrasting his youthful face. The table projected a map of the region, marked with the chilling red symbols of the Voidstar Legion. Eden 4 was a blighted scar now, and the enemy was pushing deeper, their forces splitting like some grotesque, many-headed beast towards multiple systems. "Damn it all," he muttered, the news of the fall of Eden 4 still reverberating in his ears. They hadn't been able even to slow the bastards down, much less send help. "Sir, priority transmission!" a comms officer yelled, and Sam's heart sank. News of another world lost? Instead, a familiar face flickered onto the main display. Fleet Admiral Jacobs, the grim lines etched on his face mirroring Sam's weariness. "Lieutenant," his voice was clipped and tense, "we've pulled back what we can. You've got what's left of the Third Fleet reinforcing your position, but you're also all that stands between those monsters and—" He trailed off, the unspoken implication hanging heavy. Behind Jacobs, Sam caught a glimpse of their ship's war room, a flurry of uniforms and panicked faces. Even the brass, it seemed, was starting to crack. Hope felt like a cold ember in his gut, but he forced it back to life. Eden Prime would not fall. He couldn't let it. From the corner, a weathered voice cut through the tense silence. "Incoming hostiles? Better make it count then, Lieutenant." Gunnery Sergeant Stone, old enough to have fought in wars Sam had only read about, walked towards the table, his every movement carrying the weight of decades of experience. Sam's heart skipped a beat. "Gunny Stone? I thought you retired." The grizzled veteran grinned, a glint of mischief in his weathered eyes. "Retirement is overrated, Lieutenant. Seems the war forgot to check with me first. Besides," he clapped a heavy hand on Sam's shoulder, "you boys could use some old-school toughening up. This ain't some parade ground fight, and this may be a backwater planet, but it's our backwater planet, damn it." "Welcome back, Gunny," Sam replied, a wave of relief washing over him. "Get this man reinstated and find him a uniform." A nearby private, still a bit awestruck at the legend in their midst, practically sprinted away with a crisp, "Yes, sir." The scars that crisscrossed Gunnery Sergeant Stone's weathered face weren't just a testament to battles fought, but to promotions refused. Long ago, when he was young, lean, and still carried a flicker of idealism behind his stern eyes, Gunny Stone had been a rising star in the Marine Corps. He was sharper than his peers, a natural leader, and possessed a ruthlessly efficient killer instinct that made him a legend within his unit. Promotions came like clockwork, each increase in rank thrusting him further from the front lines. He could have easily been a sergeant major or even a master gunnery sergeant, comfortable behind a desk, his battles fought on star charts instead of blood-soaked ground. But he was comfortable staying a gunnery sergeant, as each time he turned down promotions that would lead him off the battlefield. The bureaucracy, the endless reports, and the politics of the upper echelons choked him more than any alien atmosphere ever could. He wasn't a tactician playing a grand game. He was a warrior. Stone understood a simple truth that his superiors seemed to have forgotten. Wars are won by those with the mud on their boots and the smell of blaster fire in their nostrils. He needed to see the enemy and feel the rhythm of battle surge through him. The lives of his Marines depended not on theoretical strategies, but on his trigger finger and his gut instinct honed in 100 firefights. He wasn't the easiest to work with. Grudging respect, not blind obedience, was the best a new lieutenant could hope for from Gunnery Sergeant Stone. He broke rules and bent regulations, and his file of disciplinary reprimands was thick enough to choke a bureaucrat. Complaints fell on deaf ears. The brass might have muttered about him being insubordinate and reckless, but Stone won battles. His Marines came back alive, more often than not. Then came the campaign on Argos Prime. It was a pointless fight over resource rights, a world that wasn't worth the blood it took to claim. Stone watched as promising young recruits, Marines he'd mentored, were ground into dust by an enemy that exploited every mistake, every hesitation fueled by the command's indecision. It was a massacre, not a battle, and it broke something in him. Official reports lauded his heroism, the final stand that bought the remnants of his unit time to evacuate. Stone saw it differently. It was a failure, a consequence of arrogance from officers who'd never set foot on a contested drop zone. He walked away. Retirement, they called it. A comfortable desk job awaited, another medal to pin on a dress uniform he despised. He left it all without a backward glance. Years passed in a haze of half-forgotten bars and mercenary jobs that paid the bills but offered no purpose. Conflicts flared and fizzled out, but they were all the same. Petty squabbles fueled by greed, not the desperate fight for survival humanity now faced. Yet, when rumors reached him of a world called Eden 4, of humans cornered by a truly monstrous enemy, Stone felt the old fire stir. Retirement was over. He found his way back to the Marines, a ghost from a past they barely remembered. He was a tad bit out of his prime now, and scarred by battles they couldn't comprehend, yet still the most dangerous man on any battlefield. Eden Prime wasn't Argos Prime. He wouldn't let it be. Gunnery Sergeant Stone would show the galaxy, and most importantly, himself, that he wasn't a relic, but the weapon humanity so desperately needed. Understand this, Gunny. We're stretched thin across the sectors, and our forces here on Eden Prime are, at best, spotty. But trust me, every pair of boots on the ground counts out here. Stone nodded soberly. Tech update, sir. A young corporal piped up, barely out of his teens and hands a blur on the keyboards. Long-range scanners are picking up a significant energy surge. That's the main Legion fleet, all right, and they're on an intercept course. Eden Prime was no stranger to conflict. The frontier worlds always had an edge of wildness. But this was different. The whispers had turned into full-blown panic as news of Eden 4's decimation reached the streets. In the starport, a teeming mass of humanity surged against the barricades. Mothers clutched sobbing children, their eyes wide with terror. Wealthy magnates jostled with grimy laborers, united by a primal fear that shattered social boundaries. Stunned peacekeepers did their best to maintain order, but even their voices held an edge of desperation. Maya, a young botanist with soil-stained hands and a quiet determination in her brown eyes, found herself swept along with the terrified crowds. She wasn't the fighting sort, yet the thought of her lush botanical gardens burning, the rare specimens she'd nurtured consumed by alien fire. It drove a cold spike of fury through her fear. Beside her, an older man, his once crisp professorial tunic now rumpled, loaded an ancient plasma pistol with shaking hands. "Don't know if this old thing still works," he muttered, his voice strained, "but I'm no coward. Never was, never will be." Nearby, a group of factory workers, their faces smudged with grease, hefted plasma cutters repurposed into crude melee weapons. Their leader, a woman built like an ox, roared above the commotion. "Those freaks want our homes? They'll have to kill us first!" A chorus of rough cheers from her crew echoed her sentiment. The evacuation ships thundered overhead, ferrying the lucky few. But for every person who left, 3 remained. This was their world, a haven carved out of the galactic wilderness. Now they would fight for it, civilians and soldiers standing as one. Deep beneath the bustling heart of Eden Prime, a forgotten tunnel network hummed with a faint electrical pulse. Dust motes danced in the pale glow of emergency lights, revealing an ancient and purposeful scene. Rows upon rows of gleaming crates lined the damp walls, their metal surfaces decorated with a faded insignia, a stylized eagle clutching a bolt of lightning, a symbol long absent from official records. A cloaked figure, their face obscured by shadow, moved with practiced ease through the labyrinthine passage. Their boots crunched softly on a bed of what appeared to be old data chips, a testament to the forgotten technology stored within. Reaching a specific crate, the figure knelt and began a series of practiced hand motions. The crate hissed and clicked, then popped open with surprising alacrity. Inside, nestled amongst pristine cleaning cloths, lay a weapon unlike anything found in the standard marine armory. Its sleek lines and advanced targeting reticule whispered of forgotten battles and lost technology. A faint blue glow pulsed from within, hinting at the weapon's potent energy core. The figure reached in, a flicker of determination replacing the shadows on their face, and retrieved the weapon. Moments later, the lone figure hunched over a makeshift antenna array, nestled amongst the craggy peaks of a remote mountain range. Their fingers raced across a battered keyboard, lines of code flickering across a cracked screen. Sweat beaded on their forehead, a mixture of concentration and the oppressive heat radiating from the tunnels. Finally, a triumphant grin split their face. "There," they muttered, tapping a final key sequence. "Request sent. Hopefully, some of my allies are still listening out there." The cloaked figure had a message to deliver. A detailed breakdown of the Voidstar Legion's fleet composition and suspected weaknesses, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. As the cloaked figure waited for a response, she straightened. The meager light momentarily caught the outline of an old military patch, barely visible on their tattered sleeve, the same eagle and lightning insignia from the crates. This was no mere scavenger, but someone connected to whatever this hidden arsenal had been meant for. The figure removed their cloak. It was a woman, her face lined with age, and a stubbornness that seemed mirrored in the weapon she now carefully inspected. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Jacobs is believed to have perished years ago in a conflict so obscure it barely made the official history records. Yet she was very much alive. Her hair, now silver, was tied back in a functional ponytail, and her once bright eyes held a mixture of grim determination and weariness that went beyond the current crisis. "Well, old friend," she muttered to the weapon, "looks like we aren't done fighting yet." Her voice was raspy with disuse, but the iron will within it was unmistakable. Sarah had been a legend even in her time, a tactical genius, an expert in unconventional warfare, and a woman who never abandoned a world, no matter the odds. Her supposed death had been a blow to morale, whispered about as one more dark mark on humanity's ledger of losses. But Sarah Jacobs had never been one to go down easily. She had used her supposed demise and vanished into the shadows. This weapons hoard, these were her rainy day contingency, relics of a time when humanity had bolder dreams and the technology to match. Now, that rainy day had become a hurricane, and these relics, these ghosts of old wars, were potentially the only thing standing between Eden Prime and its annihilation. Back in the command center, the controlled chaos had erupted into a full-blown storm. Monitors flashed with scenes of the civilian exodus in all its desperate glory. Sam gripped the edge of his holo display so hard his knuckles turned white. Stone watched the screens with a veteran's grim stoicism, but even he couldn't entirely mask the flicker of bleakness in his eyes. "Lieutenant!" the young tech corporal yelled over the din. "Encrypted transmission just jumped in. Priority override. Unknown origin." Sam and Stone exchanged a loaded glance. Priority overrides were rare, and the unknown part was outright chilling. This could be the Legion playing games, or worse, a trap. Patch it through, Corporal, Stone ordered, his voice gravelly but with a renewed glint in his eyes. He sensed something was different, a shift in the currents of despair. A ghost appeared on the main display. It took Sam a moment to register the familiar, weathered face beneath the silver hair. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Jacobs, supposedly dead for years. But the transmission was too clean and purposeful to be some warped Legion trick. Lieutenant Parker and Gunny Stone, it's good to see you boys still breathing, her voice echoed, still with that rasp, but now laced with a steely determination. Colonel? Sam stuttered, shock warring with relief. By all the stars, you're alive. Not the time for reunions, Jacobs interrupted crisply. Her gaze flickered to something behind her, then met his with renewed intensity. I'm sending you data my group has been collecting over the years regarding the Voidstar's fleet composition, which is the best analysis of weaknesses we've got. Not foolproof, but it's more than you had a minute ago. Colonel Sarah Jacobs didn't leave the Marines. She was pushed out. There were ideological clashes, yes, but more than that, there was sheer frustration with the Earth's short-sightedness. There were too many proxy wars across the galaxy, leaving planets like Eden Prime ripe for the taking by threats like the Voidstar Legion. Jacob saw it coming. Too many battles, too many faces lost in pointless conflicts, while the real enemy grew bolder. She proposed aggressive tactics, guerrilla warfare, and whatever it took to disrupt the enemy's advance. The brass on Earth, safe in their comfortable offices, called her methods brutal and reckless. They didn't see the trenches, the desperation etched on the faces of veterans like Gunnery Sergeant Stone. Her retirement was a charade, a chance to build her resistance in the shadows. Hit-and-run tactics, every strike a thorn in the Legion's side. Earth might be blind to the actual threat. Still, Sarah Jacobs wasn't about to let Eden Prime fall without a fight, even if it meant becoming the kind of warrior the top brass had always feared. The transmission started dumping data into their systems. Tech swarmed the feeds, their frantic mutterings a stark counterpoint to Jacobs' composed delivery. Stone leaned in, decades of tactical experience kicking into overdrive. Hope, fragile but undeniably potent, flickered to life within Sam. It wasn't much, not against the enemy's overwhelming might. Yet he knew Marines had made miracles out of less. Colonel, he acknowledged, a new resolve settling in his voice. Whatever you're planning, consider us in. The command center morphed into a whirlwind of activity. Colonel Jacobs' transmission data pulsed through the systems, overloading circuits and straining the tech crew to their limits. Lance Corporal Davis, the teenage tech whiz, tapped away furiously at his keyboard, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Sir," he finally yelled, voice laced with excitement, "it's a gold mine. Weaknesses in their energy shielding, potential blind spots in their formations." Gunnery Sergeant Stone leaned over Davis's shoulder, his weathered face etched with renewed purpose. "Show me, son. Let's see what the old colonel dug up." Sam, still somewhat shocked at speaking with the supposedly dead Colonel Jacobs, gathered others around the holographic table. The image flickered to life, displaying the Voidstar Legion's fleet in all its horrifying detail, monstrous warships bristling with weaponry, their chitinous hulls glinting menacingly. "All right, Marines," Sam's voice boomed, cutting through the tense silence. "This changes everything. We're not just throwing ourselves at a brick wall anymore." He gestured at the holographic projections, highlighting the weak points Sarah had identified. "Stone," he turned to the grizzled veteran, "you and Davis figure out how to exploit these weaknesses. We need every ounce of firepower we can muster, every tactical advantage." Stone grunted in agreement, his eyes gleaming with a predator's focus. He and Davis huddled together, their voices a low murmur as they dissected the Legion's tactics. The other Marines, a mix of seasoned veterans and fresh-faced recruits, listened intently. Some faces were grim, etched with the knowledge of the long odds they faced, but others, particularly the younger Marines, carried a spark of newfound hope. A young private named Ramirez, barely out of boot camp, piped up, "So we actually have a shot at taking these guys down, sir?" Sam met his gaze, a wry smile playing on his lips. "We always have a shot, Ramirez. Now let's make it a damn good one." The air crackled with nervous energy, laced with a potent cocktail of fear and determination. Drills were intensified, weapons cleaned and re-cleaned until they gleamed, battle plans revised and rehearsed until every Marine knew their role by heart. Laughter and camaraderie, precious commodities in times of war, filled the cramped quarters, a testament to the Marines' unyielding spirit. Sergeant Avery, a hulking veteran with a booming voice, slapped a young private on the back. "Remember, rookie," he bellowed, "aim true, shoot straight, and if all else fails, fix bayonets and give those bug monsters a taste of steel." "Hurrah, Sarge!" came the reply. A cheer erupted from the squad, punctuated by nervous laughter. Despite the grim situation, a sense of grim camaraderie bloomed within the Marines. They were a band of brothers, a shield against the oncoming storm. They would fight for their planet, for their families, and for every civilian desperately scrambling for evacuation. They may be outnumbered and outgunned, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. As the clock ticked down to the inevitable clash, a grim determination settled over Sam. He stole a glance at where the Colonel's image was previously on the holographic display. "Thank you, Colonel," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The bridge of the Voidstar's flagship thrummed with monstrous energy, mirroring the satisfaction seething within the Voidstar of Sorrow himself. Victory tasted sweet on his multifaceted tongue, the scent of charred human cities, and the echo of screams a delightful symphony. Eden 4 was a smoking ruin, a testament to his might. "Bring me the casualty reports," he rasped, his voice a jagged blade cutting through the celebratory chatter of his underlings. A trembling lieutenant, scales mottled with barely concealed fear, thrust a quivering datapad into his clawed hand. The Voidstar of Sorrow skimmed the glowing figures, a vicious grin splitting his face. Human losses were immense, but his Legionnaire casualties were acceptable. "As expected," he rumbled, the sound vibrating through the chamber. "These insects are easily crushed. Prepare the Legion for the next phase of the conquest." He returned to the enormous holographic display dominating the bridge, where the system map was stained with his ever-expanding territory. Eden Prime shimmered invitingly, a ripe fruit ready to be plucked and devoured. "This so-called counteroffensive," he snarled, the words dripping with disdain. "What data do we have on that?" The silence that fell was thick, broken only by the quiet hum of the flagship's engines. Finally, Turgis, the toad-like sycophant, spoke, his voice a slimy croak. "My lord, the reports are fragmented. Primitive resistance. Easily swept aside." Yet his bulging eyes flickered nervously, betraying the unease beneath the fawning words. The Voidstar of Sorrow's eyes narrowed. He knew his lieutenants, their ambitions a constant hum beneath their servile obedience. Fear of him was useful, but it bred deception. And weakness, when concealed, could metastasize. "Details," he demanded, his voice now edged with menace. "I will have every sensor reading, every intercepted transmission." Turgis scuttled away, his toad-like form trembling. The Voidstar of Sorrow steepled his claws, a predatory stillness coming over him. The humans were fighting back, more fiercely than anticipated, true. Yet, it was nothing his Legion hadn't faced before. They were cornered rodents, their defiant squeaks a mere irritant, a slight delay before the inevitable slaughter. Yet a kernel of doubt took root. Had these humans learned something from those previous defeats? He recalled the battle reports from conquered worlds. They were predictable in their last stands, relied on outdated tactics, and had pathetic faith in heroism. But a chilling possibility flickered in his mind. What if, this time, desperation had bred something new? He dismissed the thought with a snarl. He was a conqueror. His legions were numberless, their weaponry unmatched. Let the humans cling to their fleeting hopes. Ultimately, they would kneel and witness their star systems bathed in the glorious flames of their extinction. Sweat mingled with the acrid stench of weapon discharge as the training yard echoed with shouts and blaster fire. The Marines of Eden Prime, along with a select group of civilian leadership made chiefly of volunteers and war veterans, weren't just training anymore. They were forging themselves anew. Gunnery Sergeant Stone, a figure seemingly chiseled from granite and fueled by decades of fury, stalked through the ranks, his bark barely outpacing Sergeant Avery's bellow. "Move it, grunts! The bugs ain't gonna wait for you to catch your breath!" Stone roared, prodding a lagging private with his boot. Nearby, Corporal Davis, looking barely out of his teens, huddled with a knot of Marines over a holographic projection. "Okay, see these nodes?" He gestured at a flickering weak point in a Legion frigate model. "Old Sarge here says we can punch through with a concentrated plasma volley, if we can time it right." Nervously, one of the Marines raised a hand. "But those things spin, sir, like a top. How the hell do we hit that window?" "That's why you're here," Stone grunted, appearing beside them. "To figure out the impossible." Davis and Stone exchanged a knowing glance, momentarily breaking the tension of this makeshift classroom. Across the yard, an improvised firing range thrummed with activity. Lance Corporal Alex Raymonds, his skinny frame now corded with unexpected muscle, cycled through weapons unfamiliar and unwieldy. Sarah's intel showed the Legion's chitinous armor was vulnerable to specific exotic frequencies, requiring hastily modified disruptors and jury-rigged energy projectors. His hands blistered and his head throbbed with overload, but he pushed through. The sight of Eden 4 burning was seared into his mind. Stone materialized beside him, a ghost in camouflage. "Remember, son," he rasped, handing Alex a battered canteen. "It ain't about fancy tech. It's about hitting 'em where it hurts and hitting hard." Hours melted into days, and rest was a forbidden luxury. Having already returned to their respective areas, the civilian leadership received a fair amount of training and intel to take back with them. Their job was to prepare other civilian volunteers for what may come as Stone had drilled them in classic shock tactics and close-quarters brutality. Meanwhile, Davis scrambled to sync the outdated targeting systems with Sarah's intel. Exhausted Marines collapsed, only to be hauled upright by stubborn will or their comrades' rough support. Yet, there was a change. Despair had sharpened into desperate hope. In stolen moments of respite, laughter returned, harsher than before, but alive. And in the simulations, against all odds, the Marines started winning, not every time, but enough for that flickering hope to ignite into something brighter. One early evening, amidst the organized chaos, Sam found himself beside Stone on a makeshift observation platform. Below, the Marines battled not monstrous alien war machines, but hulking maintenance droids clumsily reprogrammed for mock combat. Stone took a sip from his canteen. "They still ain't much to look at, Lieutenant," he admitted, a rare note of vulnerability in his voice. "But by God, they're learning how to bite." Sam nodded, a weary smile tugging at his lips. "Learning to bite, and maybe—" He looked towards the shimmering twin suns setting on the horizon, a sliver of defiant pride in his eyes. Maybe even learning how to sting. Meanwhile, in a different part of Eden Prime, a young woman focuses her aim. Sweat drips down Maya's forehead, blurring her vision. Her grip on the unfamiliar energy rifle felt slick and precarious. This wasn't a gardening class. This wasn't a university lecture. This was a makeshift firing range cobbled together from scrap metal and desperation, and Maya, a young botanist and former city councilwoman, was expected to become a weapon. The booming reports from neighboring stations sent tremors through her hands. Each deafening crack echoed the fear threatening to consume her. She squeezed her eyes shut, picturing her children's faces, their tear-streaked cheeks as they hugged her goodbye. Shame burned in her throat. Shame that she was here, a trembling mess, while her husband, deployed with the regular forces, faced the enemy head-on. Yet a pride bubbled up, because her once manicured nails were now chipped and raw, the telltale signs of a hand more accustomed to a weapon than a pen. A voice cut through the haze of fear. It was Dr. Reyes, a renowned astrophysicist turned battlefield tactician who had been collaborating with the military for years. His voice was calm amidst the chaos. "Focus, Maya," he said gently, his gaze steady. "Don't worry about perfect aim. Focus on the target, feel the rhythm of your breath, and pull the trigger when you exhale." Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Maya did as instructed. The world narrowed to the sight picture, the pulsing target becoming a vicious enemy staring back at her. She exhaled, and the rifle roared. The energy blast lanced out, striking the target with a satisfying sizzle. A flicker of surprise, then a hesitant smile tugged at the corner of Maya's lips. It wasn't perfect, but it hit. A cheer erupted from the civilians nearby, their faces grim but encouraging. A young man jogged over, his weapon slung casually over his shoulder. "Nice shot, councilwoman," he grinned, his youthful enthusiasm contrasting to the horrors they were preparing for. Shame gave way to a sliver of pride. Maybe, just maybe, she could make a difference in this fight. She wouldn't be a soldier, no. But she could learn to bite, just like the Marines she knew who were training to defend them all. And just like the Marines, Maya would fight for her family, city, and this battered but defiant planet. The blaster felt a little less foreign in her grip now, symbolizing her newfound resolve. A deceptive silence hung over Eden Prime. There were no crackling comms reports of approaching Legion dropships, no distant thruster screams, just the eerie hum of a world bracing itself. For the defenders, this was far worse than outright combat. The waiting was a different sort of monster, its claws icy with dread that slithered into every quiet moment. In the barracks, tension crackled like a live wire. The seasoned veterans, their faces etched with the memories of battles won and lost, went about their preparations with grim efficiency. Gunnery Stone barked orders, his voice sandpaper rough but strangely soothing in its relentless rhythm. Yet, despite the practiced movements, there was a tightness around their eyes, a silent acknowledgement that this wasn't just another fight. The newer recruits, faces barely out of boyhood, huddled in tense clusters. Sergeant Avery's usually booming voice was subdued as he ran through drills for the 5th time, his booming confidence tempered by the uncertainty etched on their faces. Laughter had vanished, replaced by whispered prayers and muttered curses. Private Ramirez, who had quipped about taking down the Legion a few days ago, stared unblinkingly at a cracked photo clutched in his white-knuckled fist. Lance Corporal Alex stood beside him, offering a silent hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity born from the unforgiving crucible of their training. Sam moved amongst his men like a restless ghost. He knew hollow pep talks wouldn't erase their fear. Instead, he focused on the practical. He double-checked supply lines and reviewed defense positions. His every order and his steady voice was a small act of defiance against the terror threatening to consume them. In another part of Eden Prime, Maya, hands still calloused from both blaster drill and her hurried attempts to salvage what she could of her precious seed bank, was drawn to the observation deck. Below, the bustling city had transformed into a stark fortress. Yet, amidst the barricades, she saw flickers of life stubbornly persisting. A cat, oblivious to the danger, chased a mouse through the deserted streets, a burst of noises echoing hauntingly. Tears pricked Maya's eyes. It wasn't just despair, but a fierce and unexpected swell of hope. Even with the monstrous shadows looming, life found a way. Her resolve hardened. She would fight, not just for survival, but for those stolen moments of joy, for the stubborn belief that light could still pierce the darkness. Back at the base, a message crackled over the comms as the emotions filled the room with anticipation. Still raspy, Sarah's voice, now with an unmistakable thread of grim satisfaction, said, "Gifts on its way, Lieutenant. Be ready to catch." A ghost ship materialized on the outskirts of the command center's holo display, a jagged shadow against the swirling map of Eden Prime's defenses. Tension crackled through the room, and the faces around the table were a mix of grim determination and flickering fear. Sam stood rigid, Sarah's transmission still echoing in his mind. "This is your chance, Lieutenant. That scout ship, it's more than a recon fly. It's their eyes and their ears. If you can crack its systems, tap into their comms." She paused, her usual rasp replaced by something like weariness. "It won't win the war, but it'll buy us time, maybe tilt the odds a fraction in our favor." Sam's gaze swept over his comrades. Stone's scarred face, carved from granite, gave the faintest nods. Corporal Davis fidgeted, excitement and a healthy dose of terror warring behind his youthful eyes. Stone, poise replaced by a warrior's resolve, met Sam's gaze unflinchingly. "We'll need a strike team," Stone announced, his voice resonating with a forced calm. "Small, fast, and the best we've got." "And tech-savvy," Davis spoke up, already jotting notes on a battered data pad. "Getting on board is one thing, but I'll need customized rigs to even attempt the hack." Stone's weathered hand slapped Davis's shoulder. "Don't worry, son. We'll get you on that tin can. Just make sure those fancy gizmos work when we do." Sam turned to a group of civilian hologram images who were listening to the conversation. Civilian volunteers had already proven themselves in training, but this was different. "Your people have the skills? The nerve?" Sam asked unapologetically. Dr. Reyes's chin lifted with quiet pride. "I was one of Eden Prime's top scientists before." His voice hitched, then steadied. "Before all this. And Professor Hale, he specializes in xenolinguistics and AI. He might help." He trailed off, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Might is better than not at all," Sam said firmly. "This is our chance to hit back, to show them we're not just waiting to die." A grim enthusiasm flared across the table. Orders were given, and gear was requisitioned. The lull had ended, replaced by frantic purpose. There was a chance, however slim, to claw back some control, and they would take it. Yet, as Sam watched his Marines and volunteers morph into a strike team, the echoes of Sarah's message whispered a darker truth. Every bit of information, every opportunity came at a price, a debt written in blood on the ledger of this war. He just prayed the price for this victory wouldn't be more than they could bear. The command center was a whirlwind before the calm. Equipment materialized from forgotten corners, the nervous shuffling of boots overlaying frantic whispers. Sam moved through the chaos, the strike team assembling around him with forced confidence. He paused beside young Private Ramirez, who was fumbling with the unfamiliar modified energy projector. "Leave the fancy stuff to the eggheads, kid," Sam said, a rough but reassuring hand gripping the boy's shoulder. "Remember what Stone said. Shoot straight. Aim true." Ramirez gave a shaky nod, his face pale but resolute. A wave of unease swept over Sam. There were so many fresh faces and so much hope to rest on a desperate gamble. It was a burden he could only share with the ghosts of previous Marines who had paved the way for him to lead. He found Stone in a secluded corner, poring over a battered map. "I got us a ship, old man," Sam said grimly. Stone gave a curt nod and then met his gaze. It was as close to a good job as they'd get from the veteran. "Davis?" Sam turned to the tech whiz, a tangle of wires and customized data interfaces hanging off him like some cyberpunk monstrosity. "Sir," Davis squeaked, "rigs are synced. But remember, the longer we're on that ship, the higher the chance of—" "I know," Sam cut him off. He knew they were on a clock, every second ticking towards their discovery. He scanned the team, Marines and scientists. Humans turned into a strike force against an unrelenting alien menace. An echo of Sarah's words surfaced. "A debt written in blood." He swallowed the fear, a taste of copper in his mouth. "Let's make it count," he rasped, the silence amplifying the soft thrum of the scout ship's reactor on the display. The converted transport shuttle was a cramped sardine can, a far cry from sleek warships. The strike team sat wedged between crates of hastily adapted weaponry, the stale air thick with tension and the pungent smell of recycled oxygen. Davis babbled tech jargon, a desperate attempt to mask his fear. Ramirez clutched his rifle so tightly that others nearby took notice. Dr. Reyes, his scholar's hunch replaced by a soldier's stiffness, offered a silent prayer to a god he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Sam wrestled with his doubts. Sarah's intel told them that the scout operated with a skeleton crew, relying on automated defenses. Yet his instincts, honed on battlefields long left to history, screamed that this was a trap. The shuttle lurched, artificial gravity stuttering. "We're matching their velocity," the pilot announced, his voice barely above a whisper. "Boarding clamps in 20 seconds. Suddenly, an alarm shrieked through the shuttle. The pilot's eyes widened. "They've detected us! Coming in hot!" His transmission cut off, replaced by the guttural chatter of Legion comms. The scout ship's trajectory shifted and turned to face the intruder with predatory intent, but it was too late. The shuttle pilots had done their job. "Brace yourselves!" Stone's growl cut through the comms. The clamps engaged prematurely, a soul-jarring clang rocking the shuttle as its airlock breached the enemy ship's hull. "Go now!" Sam roared, shouldering his way forward. The airlock door screeched open, revealing not the dim void of space, but the scout ship's interior lit by a strobing crimson battle alert. Alarms wailed, and from the depths of the corridor, the inhuman screech of Legion sentries pierced the air. Stone's squad pressed forward, their return fire disciplined, each shot aimed for maximum impact. A Legion drone shattered, its chitinous armor smoking, but two more surged forward, their mandibles gnashing in a bloodthirsty frenzy. "Fall back!" Avery roared, his voice a thunderclap above the chaos. "Tech personnel, get to that junction!" The scientists stumbled forward, Davis clutching his precious data rigs, and Dr. Reyes shielding Dr. Hale with his own body. Sweat mingled with blood on his face, and the astrophysicist now turned reluctant warrior. From above, a screech tore through the air. A second wave of Legion troops rappelled into the corridor, their segmented bodies moving with terrifying speed. Ramirez fired with utmost focus before a scream choked in his throat as a clawed hand slashed across his shoulder. "Ramirez is down!" Sam shouldered past the stricken private, his weapon barking in defiance as he covered the downed Marine. This wasn't just a scout ship, but a rapidly mobilizing death trap. "Sir, the power grid!" Davis's terror cut through the comms. "It's damaged. If I overload a junction, I might buy us a blackout. 30 seconds. Tops." "Do it." Sam knew it was a desperate gamble, but right now, desperate was all they had. "Everyone, enable night vision," he ordered. Darkness enveloped them, the disorienting silence broken only by ragged breaths and the clicking of Legion mandibles. Then, Stone's voice, a ghost in the gloom. "Move!" The team scrambled forward, guided by the faint glow of Davis's datapad. They reached the comms hub, a twisted mass of cables and alien circuitry. Dr. Reyes dropped to his knees, Hale hovering beside him, their frantic whispers a counterpoint to the renewed surge of alien screeches. There was a flicker of energy. The scout systems began to reboot, the harsh crimson light clawing back the darkness. "We're in!" Davis yelled triumphantly. "I'm getting in! Wait! Professor Hale?" Hale's reply was a choked gasp. "It's a labyrinth. Their encryption is madness, but patterns. There are patterns." The corridor echoed with the rhythmic thud of approaching Legion boots, drawing closer with terrifying speed. Meanwhile, on Eden Prime, Maya clutched the edge of the observation platform, her heart a frantic drumbeat. Below, the city was bathed in a strange twilight. The chilling silence of trepidation replaced streets once filled with children's laughter. Her gaze was fixed on the vastness of space. Was Sarah's message the beacon of hope, or a death warrant for the best and bravest they had left? Tears welled up, blurring the sky. Were they even alive anymore? Each tick of the scout ship's rebooting systems felt like a hammer blow to Sam's skull. The crimson light flickered back on, painting the scene in a stark tableau of desperation. Legion troopers advanced relentlessly, their insectile eyes reflecting the flickering glow. They were driven by a cold, dispassionate battle logic, far more horrifying than mindless rage. Dr. Reyes slumped against the comms hub, his breathing labored. Hale fumbled with the data interface, muttering alien encryptions like incantations against the approaching wave of death. "Almost there," Davis yelled, his fingers a frantic blur. "Sir, I'm getting something. Transmission logs, tactical readouts." His voice faltered, a flicker of horror crossing his youthful face. "Oh, God. They're not on patrol. They're redeploying. The main fleet." A loud boom echoed through the ship. The Legion wasn't just hunting them. They were preparing a counterstrike. Sarah's gift just revealed a far greater threat. "We've got what we can," Hale choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to get out of here, now." Stone's face was a granite mask lit harshly by the blood-red emergency lights. "Cover them," he barked, hefting his ancient plasma pistol. "Fall back. I'll hold the corridor." Sam's heart was a lump of ice in his chest. "Stone!" "Go!" The old soldier's roar echoed through the din of combat. "That's a damn order, Sam." Reluctantly, Sam turned. Ramirez was over his shoulder, the injured private's breaths ragged but determined as he held a pistol in hand, still firing at his enemies. Avery's squad laid down suppressing fire, their weapons spitting angry defiance, buying them precious seconds. On the run, their flight was a blur of strobing lights and alien screams, and a burst of static crackled over the comms. Then Sarah's rasp, faint but unmistakable. "Team, respond." "Colonel," Davis shouted, fumbling for the transmitter. "We have data. Legion deployments. It's bad." His voice trailed off. Up ahead, a flicker of golden light marked the docking bay. Escape pods lined the walls like grotesque metal eggs, but between them and salvation, a hulking Legion brute blocked their path, its chitinous armor stained with blood. Marine blood, most likely. "Fall back!" Sam's order came out as a strangled cry. They wouldn't make it. Every survival instinct screamed at him to turn, to run. Still, a memory flickered in his mind, the stubborn look of hope in the farewell party's eyes as his unit boarded for departure on this mission. A large group of civilians and military personnel gathered to see them off. Then it hit him. He and his strike team were all that stood against this evil army. They were a flicker of defiance holding back the darkness. It was insane, utterly hopeless, and the only way forward that made any damn sense. "Ramirez," he gasped, shoving the stricken private towards an escape pod. "Get this data back to Eden Prime." The rest he didn't say. He hefted his weapon, a grim echo of Stone's lone stand echoing in his heart. It was time to buy his people a chance, however slim. Maya stood on the observation platform, her hands clamped to the railing so tightly that the metal threatened to bend. The battle was a distant speck she couldn't see, but she knew it hung somewhere in the sky. Had the strike team survived? Were they bearing vital intel, or was that flicker in space their funeral pyre? Around her, the city resonated with an uncanny silence. Civilians huddled in makeshift shelters, their murmurs silenced. Makeshift barricades creaked ominously, manned by a grim mix of tired professionals and frightened civilians. Yet, an echo remained, fragile and unrelenting. Hope, battered but unbroken. Suddenly, a blip on the main display of her datapad caught her attention. It wasn't the sleek lines of Legion warships, but a battered escape pod, a lone spark defying the void. It streaked towards Eden Prime. The pod crashed into the city's outskirts, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. Military and first responders were immediately dispatched, faces etched with grim determination. They were followed by scientists and analysts, clutching datapads with trembling hands. Maya found herself among them, rifle at the ready. Her warrior's heart held no fear. The pod's hatch hissed open as all weapons were drawn at the pod. First out was Private Ramirez, his face pale, an injury hastily bandaged. The device he clenched in his hands was their beacon of hope, the hard-won data from the bowels of the enemy. And then, a silence heavier than any explosion settled upon the crowd. Dr. Reyes slumped in the pod's dim interior, his eyes staring sightlessly. Professor Hale knelt beside him, shoulders slumped in wordless grief. The data had come at an unimaginable cost. Days passed as news of the mission rippled through all of the human-occupied territories in the galaxy. Sam, Stone, and countless unknown heroes are gone. Yet Davis hunched over the data, the shadows under his eyes competing with the victorious glint in them. "It's not complete," he reported, his voice a hoarse whisper. "But it's enough. We found the weakness in their armor, the thread that if we pull—" Sam's replacement, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Jacobs, nodded grimly. "Then let's turn their gift into a noose." The bittersweet victory echoed through Eden Prime. Songs of bravery and tributes to the fallen emerged from the grim silence. Ramirez, once a boy, now a battle-scarred Marine, housed Stone's unshakable will. While tending her salvaged seed vaults, Maya found a note folded among her precious botanical samples. Reyes' scrawled handwriting, a final act of a scientist-turned-soldier, read, "We won't let it be for nothing." Months passed, a blur of calculated strategies and grim determination in the command center under Colonel Jacobs's leadership. Then, an unscheduled transmission crackled to life on the hollow projector, a monstrous visage filling the room without warning. "Humans," the Voidstar of Sorrow hissed, his voice laced with a chilling echo of satisfaction. "Your petty strikes have been a nuisance. Our plans adjust, but your doom marches on." A cruel smile stretched his inhuman face as he stepped aside, revealing a sight that stole the breath from every throat in the room. Lieutenant Sam Parker and Gunnery Sergeant Stone were frozen in stasis fields, their expressions defiant even in captivity. A wave of despair crashed over the command center. Still, Sarah Jacobs, the once exiled war hero and brilliant tactician, met the Voidstar of Sorrow's gaze with a chilling smile. "Thank you," she mocked. The Voidstar's eyes narrowed in confusion before she abruptly cut the transmission. Ignoring the room buzzing with a mix of horror and stunned disbelief, Sarah spoke into her comms, her voice a razor's edge. "Alpha 1, were you watching?" A quick and confident response crackled back. "Affirmative, ma'am. Location confirmed. We are on the move now. We're bringing them home, no matter what. Alpha 1 out." Sarah glanced around at the sea of confused faces, taking a slow breath as the weight of what she had orchestrated settled upon her. "Make no mistake," her voice rang with grim determination. "This is now a rescue operation. The command center enters full wartime protocol. Now." A chorus of questions erupted, but one voice broke through. "Ma'am, with all respect, they're alive? I don't understand." Davis, the young tech genius, grinned with a wicked glint in his eye. A holographic image flickered onto his datapad for all to see, a grotesque, toad-like figure with pustulant skin that made some recoil. Sarah's predatory smile was a testament to the relentless strategist she had always been. "Allow me to introduce our inside source, Turgus, with whom my group has worked with for years." She gestured to the image. "Army Special Ops and Ranger teams have been infiltrating their flagship for days and are on the move now, the culmination of a plan months in the making." Her gaze swept the room, the faces a mixture of awe and creeping fear. "The mission is simple," she declared, her voice echoing with the steel she had forged within herself. "We bring our boys home, and then we unleash hell."